Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Status Effect Show. I'm your host, Michael Atkins, and today we're talking about the legal side of esports and gaming. With me to discuss this topic is a friend of the show, Mr. Johnathan Jordan. Thank you so much for being here, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Welcome back. I really appreciate you coming back on the show. I'm really excited to have you back on. Now, for those of you who don't know, Johnathan was our first guest on the show, and we knew then that we wanted him back to talk about his legal expertise on a later episode. When he was initially on the show, we discussed how he started the DFW Esports group, and then how that concept later inspired this one, the Status Effect Show. I'll leave a link in the description below for that episode so you can go and check that out and just kind of see what you missed. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk some legal. First, let's give people a reminder on what exactly it is that you do.
Yeah, so I'm an attorney at a law firm in Dallas called Kane, Russell, Coleman, and Logan. We're a firm of about 70 lawyers between Dallas and Houston. Lawyers who do everything from litigation, which is what I do, general corporate work, real estate, intellectual property, immigration, pretty much you name it, we probably have a lawyer who does it. And about 2 years ago now, I guess, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I started the process of launching an esports practice for the firm. So that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years. I've got a few clients in the space already. I have an org client. I've done some work on the player side. We represent a few companies just with their general corporate matters. But yeah, I'm just trying to build that practice up.
Very cool. Very cool. So you said, how long had you been doing it again?
Probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Okay.
For a year and a half, 2 years. I think March of 2019 is when I first kind of started looking to get into it.
Nice. And what made you decide to become a lawyer? Like, when was that moment that you were like, this is what I want to do?
Well, my dad's a lawyer, so I grew up around it. So I've kind of always had it in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. I love writing, which is a huge part of being a lawyer. So figured that would be the best way to put my skills to use.
Fair enough. So, like, writing, when you say that, like creative writing or just what?
Just writing in general.
Okay.
I more developed it in college, I guess. I mean, I don't like write poetry or really like write journals.
Okay.
But just like writing reports, history reports, I always enjoyed doing.
Nice.
So just kind of putting those skills.
A little bit more analytical writing then.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, what drew you to utilize your legal expertise for esports? Like, why? What was kind of the connector between legal and esports?
So, I mean, I grew up playing a lot of these games, Legends, Dota, Call of Duty, still play Call of Duty and FIFA. So I've loved the video game industry, and I really started getting into following esports a little over 2 years ago. And I saw that, especially in Dallas is such a hotbed for esports, and there aren't a whole lot of lawyers in Dallas who are in the space.
Right.
And the lawyers who are in the space are at larger international law firms whose billing rates are sky high. So I noticed that the industry is extremely startup heavy, a lot of new companies forming, trying to get into the space. So I saw an opportunity for us as a mid-sized firm to get into the space, offer a more affordable alternative to those larger law firms, but with the same breadth and scope of services as those law firms.
Absolutely.
Just saw an opportunity to get in and really help the startups and smaller to mid-sized companies in the space. And I've got some connections with larger companies in the space. And our firm represents Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, but we also represent startups and sole proprietorships and smaller companies. So
very nice.
For a way to help the industry in that way.
So what sort of services do you guys offer? I know you just said that you kind of just go across the spectrum as far as like who you represent, from sole proprietorship to Fortune 500. What sort of services does your firm offer?
Yeah, so like I said, we have lawyers who do general corporate work, so mergers and acquisitions, entity formation. We have tax attorneys, employment attorneys, um, immigration attorneys, IP. So we can help. We have helped companies in the space with trademark filings, um, stuff like that, and then.
Sure.
My personal background is in commercial litigation, so representing businesses in court.
Okay.
And there hasn't been a whole lot of litigation in the esports industry yet. So the work that we have been doing has been more transactional work in the space. So
Okay. Well, that's fair. That's fair. Is there a difference between traditional business law and esports law? Have you found any major differences or challenges?
Not yet. I mean, definitely with negotiating contracts, it does definitely help to have the expertise and knowledge in the industry. But as far as just general entity formation, assisting in mergers and acquisitions, I mean, you do need to have knowledge of the industry to provide better assistance in as far as mergers and acquisitions. But entity formation, drafting corporate documents, not so much. I mean, the general just corporate expertise that we have easily transitions over in that regard.
Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned contracts. What I know there's been some debate within not only the esports industry but the general gaming and content creation industry as well. How many player contracts have you explored in your time?
So as I said before, I've done both org and player side. I've drafted the standard contract for my org client, and then I also helped the former Optic Gaming Gears of War team negotiate their deal with NRT, and then subsequently their deal with UIU when they moved over to UIU.
Okay.
And so I've helped them negotiate their deals with those teams, and those teams use this kind of standard contract that's out there. So yeah, and I've seen other contracts as well. I've helped a couple companies draft their content creator contracts, which there are some overlaps. But yeah.
So is it different for a content creator? I imagine it is, than an org or a team, rather, as far as signing somebody to an org as a team, say like Gears of War, versus a content creator who's just one person creating content for the brand.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's some overlap. There's some general similar terms,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not. I mean, the specifics are obviously different as far as the requirements for the whatever services the content creator is going to be providing, whether that be I don't know, number of streams or what they're expected to be doing each month as far as number of streams or whatever they're doing. But I mean, there are similar provisions in the player contracts as well regarding that too. I mean, the players have obligations for their contracts to stream a certain number of times or number of hours a week. So like I said, there are some similarities in it.
Yeah, I had no idea about. I guess it makes sense. When I talked to a couple org owners, they stated that they didn't want to do streams. They were very anti-streaming because they didn't want people looking at their strats and things like that and seeing, oh, here's the player's mannerisms. Have you seen anything like that, or can you talk about anything like that?
I mean, all the contracts I've seen have had some type of streaming requirement in there.
Okay.
And I think, I mean, it goes to, I know Hex says this, content is king in the industry. So I think for orgs to be able to succeed, if they're not hiring just content creators separate from their competing teams, I think it's essential that the players stream just to build the brand, the team name, and the presence, or else the org's not going to succeed. I mean, to succeed, these orgs need to diversify.
Sure.
What they can't just be strictly competing. They need to do something else to survive, and that's content creation.
I agree. I think I brought the same thing up as far as, well, aren't you afraid that you're just going to rely too much on tournaments and things like that? Which sometimes, I mean, you got to win in order to in order to generate interest and money and things of that nature. You can't just rely on that plus maybe merch. You got to try and have your hand in a bunch of different areas. So yeah, I definitely agree. Content creation is good for those sorts of organizations. That's interesting though, because I didn't think that would be in a contract, but it makes sense. I mean, it's just like a content creator's contract, but a little bit more focused maybe on the esports and tournament play side, which is interesting.
But I think, I mean, it is definitely a fine line, though. I think when you're just having the players stream, like you mentioned, you don't want their mannerisms to really be out there for anyone to review. I mean, I know teams review tape anyway from competition, so they're already out there. It's probably not as big of an issue, but I mean, it's still probably something to consider. But I think, like I said, for an average org to survive, need to be doing content creation. So they're not going to survive strictly on competition unless you're one of the larger orgs who are in the LCS and who are just raking in tournament winnings. And I mean, you still need to have something else.
Yeah. So that actually, I thought of something interesting while you were saying that. So Hiko from 100 Thieves, the new Valorant, I guess he's the team captain for their Valorant squad. He basically, I saw him as a streamer before I saw him as a professional player. I know he's played CS and things like that in the past, but he streams, I think, I want to say pretty much daily. I mean, he streams a lot. I've seen a lot of his clips on YouTube. I've seen him on Twitch, or maybe his YouTube gaming. Now that I think about it, but yeah, he streams a lot. So I mean, there are people that go the opposite. They are captains, they are professional players, but they also stream so much. I mean, do you think, in your professional opinion, it would end up hurting a team to stream?
I mean, if you're going to stream, if you're going to be successful, I mean, you have to do it every day. I mean, you have to treat it like it is a job.
Yeah.
If you're a player doing it on the side also, I think you still need to do it to just build up your personal brand. But I think, I don't know. I think in the long run, I think it's more important to build up your brand. And to do that, you have to stream. And like I said, there are other avenues for other competing teams to track these players and watch their how they play. So I don't necessarily think it should be a huge concern.
Okay.
If you're talking about minimizing streaming to protect the players, like you said, mannerisms or
their strats,
their playing strategies. Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily as big of a concern just because there are other avenues to research and scout players anyway.
That's true. I agree. I think that orgs shouldn't be worried about that necessarily. They should be worried about their brand and building each individual player up as a brand, as well as building up the team and the company, because one will build up the other and vice versa. So that makes sense. What advice would you give to players who maybe are just coming in fresh into this? They want to get into the esports industry. They want to get into content creation. What advice would you give to them if they get to the stage of signing with an organization?
I mean, first and foremost, I'm biased, but I would say have an attorney review the contract. I mean, that that's a huge issue, is players 17, 18, 19-year-olds getting in the space. They see a contract, they get an offer to be paid to play video games, and they're just going to sign it. They don't care. They just see the money that they're going to be getting under the contract and how long the contract is. That's it. But these contracts are getting more and more complex as we go along. I mean, the standard player contract is 35 to 40 pages long.
Wow.
And there are a lot of provisions in these contracts that, I mean, all the provisions are negotiable. I mean, some are more negotiable than others. Some are worth more to negotiate than others. But definitely have an attorney review the contract. And I don't want to say, I mean, at a minimum, have an agent also, but I've also come across agents who I've negotiated against agents who don't really know what they're talking about when they're talking about some of these provisions in the contract.
Right.
So that's also, I mean, obviously there are great agents out there, but it is worrisome that there are some agents out there who don't know the effect of some of these provisions in these contracts. So ideally, in an ideal world, I would say have a lawyer review the contract.
Absolutely.
Costs money, and that scares people away. But in the long run, you're better off having someone review it and at least give you guidance on what you should be looking out for.
Right. So what would you say to people who are worried about the cost of hiring a lawyer? I mean, what's the cost analysis, essentially, I think is the word that I'm looking for, when coming to that decision and being like, okay, I do need to hire a lawyer or an attorney or somebody to represent me in these legal proceedings for negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need a lawyer to negotiate like the salary or the term of the contract. That's, I mean, anyone can do that. They know what money they want. The team knows what money they're willing to pay. So you don't really need any expertise to do that. But you definitely need to, and attorney costs vary depending on what attorney you get. And there are ways that you can negotiate how to get paid. I mean, you could make it a percentage of whatever your salary is going to be. I know just in general, sports agents, for example, I think either the NBA or NFL is capped at 3% commission for an agent off of a player salary. So you could do it that way, or you could find a lawyer who's willing to do it for free if possible. I mean, that would be the ideal situation for it for free. But it's probably, depending on how significant the contract is, because there are different variations of contracts out there as well. So it depends on the contract length, how complex the contract is, what other specifics need to be negotiated in the contract, if there are other services that are going to be provided. So, but ultimately in the long run, I believe it's a worthwhile investment to have a lawyer review the contract. But again, I'm biased.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense.
I want to protect the players as well. So
yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That's your passion, and that's what you want to do, and that's your advice, even if it is biased. I mean, it's still good advice to try and make sure you're covered in all angles.
I mean, the other thing to consider is these contracts. They're the term of the contracts. They can be anywhere from 6 months to several years. And I mean, depending on the title, the average career of a player in esports isn't that long. I mean, it's definitely not as long as traditional sports athletes' careers. So especially if you have a contract that's calling for 2 or 3 years, it makes it that more important to make sure everything gets done correctly for that contract, because you might only see one more contract in your career.
Yeah.
So, and they're certain provisions, non-competes in these contracts that that I have negotiated against, limitations on when the players when the contract expires. It's there are provisions that the players need to be wary of that could limit what they do after this contract.
Yeah, and that's some scary stuff to think about when you are a player or you are somebody who is trying to get in this industry and you don't know things like that. So you kind of go in blind and say, okay, well, they have me locked down for this amount of time, and I'm not allowed to be scouted by another organization because it's in my contract for 2 or 3 years or however long. But yeah, that's some crazy stuff. So we've been talking about player contracts. What are some things that players need to look for in a contract, and what are some things that you have advised on yourself?
So one of the biggest one of the biggest issues that you actually see a lot written about is whether players are independent contractors. I've actually written an article on it that was published in a publication, a legal publication in Texas.
Nice.
But I think that's the issue that gets the most publicity. And I think there is a tendency, especially for the larger orgs, to classify the players as employees, which of course entitles players to minimum wage, overtime, health insurance, and also requires the orgs to withhold Social Security, Medicare, and all of that stuff. But what you see in these contracts is they specifically say player is going to be or will be considered an independent contractor of the team. And it's not as simple as that. It really, what you say in the contract about it really does not have any effect on whether the player is an independent contractor or an employee under the law. That's determined by the amount of control that the team has over the player and what the player is doing, the specifics of the player's services. And it opens by trying to classify the players as independent contractors. I mean, the obvious kind of the motivation for doing that is it's cheaper. Like I said, if the players are employees, the orgs have to withhold certain taxes in Medicare, Social Security, and it opens the orgs up to liability by wrongfully classifying players as independent contractors. But it also deprives the players of benefits they should have as employees, health insurance. So that's the big issue. And I think in most situations, in my opinion, players would be considered employees under the law. I mean, just comparing with traditional sports, traditional athletes in team sports are employees of the teams. It doesn't depend on how long the contract is. I mean, it can be a factor, but if you have a 6-month contract, you could still be an employee. It doesn't have to be it's not like it has to be at least a year or something.
Okay. So
it's all about the control that the team has over the player, controlling what they're doing, making them go to competitions, making them go to practices, providing them equipment to use. Stuff like that are what factor into what the players will be classified as. So that's probably the biggest hot topic. I think that, like I said, has gotten the most publicity.
Sure. And I know we were talking about it behind the scenes as far as like sponsorship deals and kind of the line that some players have had to walk with taking sponsorship deals. Can players take sponsorship deals when they work with an organization or are on a team that already have sponsorships?
Yeah, I mean, the players can take their own individual sponsorships. They just can't compete, or not compete, but they can't work against team sponsorships the team already has. But I mean, there are some provisions in these contracts that sometimes try to make the team the exclusive representative of the player in negotiating sponsorship deals for the player, individual sponsorship deals. And in my mind, that makes no sense.
Right.
The player, I mean, if you're just looking at traditional sports players have agents who work with them to negotiate the player sponsorship deals. The team's not doing anything. And I think there's an inherent conflict of interest there, especially when the team is getting a cut from, at least in some of the contracts I've seen, getting a cut from some of the player sponsorship revenues.
So so you're saying that the players who bring in their own personal sponsors or who have their own sponsors have to give a cut of their revenue from those sponsors to the org?
There are in some of the contracts I've seen, there are provisions where the team will take, if it's a sponsorship that the player has brought in himself,
mm-hmm.
the team will still say they'll take 10% or 20% of the revenue. And I think, in my mind, even though I do represent orgs, I think players should keep the entirety of whatever sponsorships they bring in.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I think there's an inherent conflict of interest with the team negotiating or saying they're going to be the exclusive representative of players negotiating these individual sponsorships for the players when they're also taking a cut from it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that if it's obviously in org's sponsorship and they're going to take a cut of the money and things like that and maybe give players benefits or partial revenue from that, but at the same time, if a content creator or a pro player brings in their own sponsorships and they're not conflicting with the team sponsorship or the org sponsorship, yeah, I mean, like you've said multiple times, the player has to diversify as far as their ad revenue and their sort of content creation, because content is king, and the average lifespan that we were talking about for an esports player is not very long. It's not as long as a traditional sport player. So they've got to look out for them while also making sure that they don't anger the organization or sort of jeopardize that relationship. So it makes sense. I think I think that you are 100% right. I think that the players should retain that revenue from personal sponsorships,
and just that right to negotiate
yeah.
and get those sponsorships on their own,
mm-hmm.
And not have the team doing it for them.
So should the orgs have power to sign off on sponsorship, like personal sponsorships, just making sure that they don't compete, or where's kind of the legal line there?
Well, I mean, there are provisions in the contract that say any individual sponsorships you get cannot conflict with any sponsorships that the team has. So right. There are already provisions in place for that.
Okay.
So it's more just the ability to negotiate is really the main thing.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I get that. And then you also mentioned something else when mentioning the big three as far as things that players need to look out for in contracts.
Yeah, so first one is independent contractor status. Second one is where the team is the representative for negotiating individual sponsorship deals. And the third one, the third big ticket provision in these contracts is the right of first refusal. So at the end of the contract, if there's a right of first refusal, the team will have the right to match any offer that the player gets from a new team. So, for example, at the end of the contract, a lot of these contracts will say during the 4 months after, or 3 or 4 months or whatever time period there is after the expiration of the contract, the player first, the player must disclose any offers they get from other teams, and two, their current team will have the right to match that offer. And if the team matches that offer, at least matches the larger terms of the offer, so salary, length of contract, then the player is required to stay with the team. Wow. And I think that is a big potential hazard for players in a situation where if they're not happy with the team, but the team wants to keep them for whatever reason, then they could be potentially locked in with that team if the team decides to match an offer to keep them playing for them. And I mean, there are obviously issues with, I think with the relationship between the team and the player as far as whether the player's happy or not. I don't really think a team would want to keep a player who's unhappy anyway, but still it's something to think about. I mean, it could limit the player's ability to go somewhere else.
So how prevalent is that? I mean, is that pretty much commonplace in contracts?
Those clauses are definitely, right of first refusal is in pretty much every contract I've seen.
Okay.
I think there are specific parts of those provisions that vary between contracts. So the length of time for that right of first refusal or right of first option, first refusal. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really seen a contract that does not include some type of right of first refusal in there. It basically makes the players a restricted free agent.
Yeah, I mean,
that's how I look at it.
Absolutely. That's interesting to think about. Yeah, because that didn't make sense to me when you first said it, and now that you've explained it, it's just kind of mind-boggling that an org would want to. Well, I mean, obviously they don't want to piss off their players or have a bad relationship with their players, but having that sort of safety clause in there to lock in a player and to make sure that, hey, we've got our big names. I'm assuming they're doing it for the big name players and people who are bringing in a lot of attention and money to the org. Yeah, that just seems very, very toxic, to put it in those terms. But yeah, what else have you seen in these contracts that both could damage the player or the organization if not careful?
I mean, there's some smaller provisions. So some contracts have liquidated damages clauses when they're talking about protecting confidential information. If confidential information is disseminated by the player without approval from the team, then the team is entitled to X number of dollars. I mean, it's an automatic damages. So if it was to go to court, the team would not be required to prove up the amount of their damages. They would we have a liquidated damages clause. And honestly, liquidated damages clauses they're hard to enforce if they're not enforceable if they're viewed as penalties. Mm-hmm. It needs to be an estimate of the reasonable damages that would be expected from the breach of the contract. But I have seen liquidated damages clauses that call for $100,000 in damages. So I often try to just negotiate that out of the contract, or at a minimum, try to minimize it down to the lowest the team will go. Yeah. I mean, it's rare that these provisions would ever come into effect.
Yeah.
So they require the player to breach the contract in whatever way is tied to the liquidated damages clause. But it's still something that could happen, and it's something that the players don't think about. So that's a smaller one.
So on that, really quick, I have seen instances where other people have actually broken that for the individual. So people have said, oh, so you're joining, I can't remember who it was, but somebody who was a part of an organization was like, oh, so you're joining FaZe Clan or 100 Thieves or something like that, and that wasn't public knowledge yet, who does the individual still get in trouble for that?
The liquidated damages clauses are tied to confidentiality agreements within the contract. So disseminating proprietary information, I can't talk, information that the player acquires through their employment with the team. That's where the liquidated damages clauses come into play. I haven't seen it come into play. I haven't seen any lawsuits filed, really, where this comes into play. But again, it's just kind of a specter that could hang over the player's head. And the player shouldn't be going and spilling team secrets anyway. But
No.
It's just a small thing that I always negotiate either out of or minimize.
That's smart. That's smart.
There.
And what other, you were about to talk about other smaller provisions within a contract. What other smaller provisions have you seen?
Those are kind of the main ones. There's smaller, just not necessarily provisions, but just language in the contract that players wouldn't think twice about, but do make a difference. That I have negotiated against or negotiated into the standard player contract. So, for example, there's some just wordings that I negotiated against when I was helping the Years of War team negotiate their deal with NRG, and when I negotiated for them against UIU, both of those teams used the same standard contract. And I noticed that the language that I had negotiated into the NRG contract was included in the first draft that I got from UIU. It was already incorporated. So that was encouraging, that some terms that I negotiated are being incorporated into the now standard or the new iterations of the standard contract.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be hard to explain kind of those, at least during this, just because it's just, like I said, it's kind of not legalese, but just wordings that make a difference, but you wouldn't necessarily, an average player wouldn't think twice about.
Absolutely. And that's something.
But other things I've negotiated that are included, for example, are like per diems for players. So when they're traveling, the team should, or the org should give the player X number of dollars a day for lunch or dinner, for food, which is not included in the standard contracts, but makes a difference for the players. When they're traveling, it's less money coming out of their pockets. So I've negotiated that in contracts as well. Again, something small, but something that helps the players out.
Yeah, honestly, with all the traveling that esports players and teams do,
we're doing.
Well, yeah, we're at a different time. That seems like a pretty big deal to me. You say it's small, but I know when I was on the road, during with one of my companies, I got a per diem pretty much. Was just like, hey, we'll pay you X amount of dollars a day. You spend it on food, sort of deal. You can spend up to this much, and it does make a difference. I don't want to be spending my own money if I'm there on business.
Yeah, and the average player, the average player is not making six figures a year.
Right.
These players are making just a few thousand a month even. So, those per diems really do make a difference when you're having to travel. So yeah, like I said, it's a small thing, but it's something that the average player probably doesn't really think about when they're signing, at least when they're signing their first contract.
Yeah.
They don't think about those types of things, but.
And this is why you should hire somebody to represent you. If you're getting
a lawyer,
yes.
A lawyer ideally.
Yes, a lawyer ideally. If you
reputable agent, don't just get a random agent.
Yeah. If you are like at this stage where, hey, companies are interested in you, you're a hot player, then definitely make sure to get somebody who is going to represent you and going to represent you well, because there are all these things like Johnathan has mentioned that you might not think about because you're focused on playing a game. That's not your job is not to focus on all the legalese and all what's in your contract, even though you will be responsible for those. So hiring somebody to help you with that, to help kind of offset the burden, is going to really be a game changer for a lot of these newer players, and hell, even more experienced players who just want a better contract. Because like Johnathan was saying, he's seen a bunch of contracts that kind of, I mean, I don't want to say screw over, but screw over the, or at least put things in there that can potentially hurt players. So,
And I mean, we'll put it this way: the contracts are designed to be org friendly.
mm-hmm.
They're drafted by attorneys for the organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always room to negotiate. These contracts are definitely not perfect. They're definitely not player friendly. So yeah, always, if you can, get a lawyer to negotiate these provisions in these contracts, because every contract is negotiable. Don't just sign your first contract that comes to you.
So where do you want to take this passion, and where do you see it going within 5 years? You said you wanted to start your own esports litigation firm and things like that, correct?
Well, I don't want to start my own firm. I want to develop this practice at my current firm, because I think our current firm is well positioned to be a valuable servant in the industry to help it out, just with our scope of services, our lower costs. So just keep developing that practice. Luckily, I'm a fourth year attorney, and I'm not expected to bring in business this early in my career. So it's really allowing me to focus on just building connections, building a reputation in the industry. And then the goal is hopefully work will organically flow from that. But right now, I'm really focused on just trying to help the industry in whatever way I can. And right now, that's helping people make connections. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to start the monthly meetups that we were doing in the Dallas area.
Yeah.
So just trying to connect startups with investors, companies with other companies, to foster collaboration. That's where I'm finding I'm providing the most value right now, and really trying to really become probably a business leader in the industry first. And then hopefully that legal practice will continue to develop as it is. But that's been the focus, and is going to be my focus moving forward.
That's good. That's good. We're both on the same page there, just trying to do what we can for the industry in whatever way we can, using our talents and time and putting effort into it. And yeah, I know the DFW Esports group has really helped. Not just myself, but a lot of other people make connections and basically bring out their passions and things like that. So thank you for that.
And we had some success stories too.
Yeah.
So I was hoping to get them started back up again in July or August. I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. Hopefully we can get something started back up by the end of the year. But yeah, I definitely am excited and hopeful that we can get those going again, because it was growing every day. We were having more people show up every month. And I think it was a success in what we were trying to do with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was a good time, and I think a lot of people got a lot out of it. So I hope that does continue back up when things start getting less crazy in the world. Yeah. So, but yeah, who knows when that'll be, right?
Yep. Yeah. Big question mark.
Yeah. But what would you say to those who want to pursue a legal career but don't know what kind of law that they want to practice?
I think It depends on, I mean, if you're in law school, um, just take different classes, as many different classes you can to find what area of the law you're passionate about. Someone in my boat who's a young lawyer at a law firm, I think just find an industry that you are passionate about and then just try to go and meet people in it. Um, it's it's all about who you know. I mean, obviously you need to know the industry, know the law, whatever laws are applicable to your industry, but it's all about finding just an industry that you're passionate about or an area of the law that you're passionate about. Um, so if you're at a law firm, try to get with attorneys older lawyers in different areas of law and try to do work with them to find out if you enjoy practicing in that specific area. Um, but yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper just because a buddy of mine is actually studying law right now in school. So I know he would want me to ask this, but how do you make those connections? I mean, obviously there's these groups on what I'm assuming Facebook, LinkedIn, places that you can kind of reach out. What would be the preferred method, or what would be, in your opinion, the most successful method on that?
I mean, for me personally, when I was looking for a job out of law school, I just reached out to alumni in the area from my law school and just asked if they were willing to meet with me and talk with me. And I mean, I think if your friend does that, he'll find that most lawyers are willing to do that, willing to sit down and just talk about their practice. Even if you're not looking for a job, just talk about their practice, answer questions about the profession, how to navigate it. But as far as getting plugged into an industry, I mean, LinkedIn has been my best friend for esports. That's how I got plugged in, was just reaching out to people.
Same.
Saying, I'm trying to learn about the industry. I want to help it in my capacity as a lawyer. Just want to pick your brain about your experiences. And that's been, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this without LinkedIn. I've been extremely successful as far as using LinkedIn to get plugged into the industry connections. So I'm probably a success story in that regard. But
LinkedIn
yeah,
sponsor the show.
Yeah. But don't be afraid to ask to talk to someone. I mean, the worst that happens is they say no or they ignore you, which I've had both happen to me. But I mean, I've reached out to several high-profile people, and whether that be high-profile investors, trying to connect startups with them, and I've gotten at least responses from them. I've reached out to some celebrities, some athletes who are on LinkedIn, who are involved in esports, just to talk with them and find out what they're doing. And I've had a couple respond to me. So I mean, don't be afraid to reach as well. I mean, like I said, the worst that happens is they ignore you or say no, but otherwise you're going to get a conversation and you're going to learn a ton.
Absolutely.
It'll point you to other people to expand your network. It's all about expanding the net and expanding your umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, which is basically what you have been doing over the past couple of years, as far as just networking and trying to get as many people as contacts as you can, which is what most industries are nowadays. It's networking, who you know, and what you can learn from all these people and their experiences, which is, yeah. I mean, it's invaluable, really, and LinkedIn is a great source to do that. So definitely do that. If you guys are looking for, it doesn't matter the industry, if you guys are looking to make connections, if you guys are looking for people to talk to for experience, definitely go on LinkedIn, go on Facebook, research the groups that you really want to work with, and kind of learn about their culture, learn how people got started in that industry if you can, and don't be afraid to reach out to people, because honestly, that's what I did, and that's what Johnathan did. So definitely make sure that you reach out to people, because nothing ventured, nothing gained. I mean, you're going to get a lot of no's, but you're going to get the yeses that matter. You know what I mean? The people who are going to take the time and kind of mentor you. So definitely do that. I encourage everybody, all the viewers, to do that. And yeah, I mean, that kind of brings us to the end of the show. Unless, do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No,
No.
no. But yeah, if people want to learn more about me, what I'm doing, they can go to my LinkedIn page, my firm website. For any players out there who are watching, feel free to contact me. I can at least talk you through any questions you have. But yeah, like I said, we're trying to trying to do a lot of work in the space, and not just limited to players and orgs. We're definitely committed to helping the space, and that's our goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know you kind of mentioned a couple, but where are the best places for people to find you?
Yeah, so my LinkedIn is probably my best
Okay.
way. Then just search me, Johnathan Jordan. Um, Firm website, krcl.com. That'll have information on me and all the other lawyers in our firm and all the practice areas we have. I'm trying to get more active on Twitter. I think my handle is DFW Esports Law, so they can find me on that. But I'm definitely the most active on LinkedIn.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think last time you said that too, that you were trying to get more active on sites like Twitter and.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a slow process.
I get it, man.
I'm just not used to it.
It's not just that. There's also a bunch of, every time I get on social media, it feels like there is just hate being spewed everywhere, and
yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, definitely go check out Johnathan Jordan on all of his links. I'll link them down in the description below, guys. But if you have questions, if you're looking to get into this industry, or you're just looking to network like I was, then definitely go check it out. I will, like I said, leave all the links in the description below. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for viewing the Status Effect show. We appreciate all of our viewers, appreciate the feedback that we've been getting, as well as just sort of the response, and hopefully we can keep this going for as long as we can. We're gonna try and keep educating people, try and to get guests that really know their stuff, know what they're talking about, and can help our viewers get into the industries that they want. So thank you guys so much. Make sure to leave a like, comment, all that good stuff down below, and we'll see you in the next one.